Okay, in the last lecture, we merged the make and feature service into one service, vehicle service. However, on the server side, we have two separate controllers, features controller and makes controller. So here's a question. Should we merge these two controllers into a single controller like vehicles controller? Once again, it depends. We have to look at the pros and cons of such restructuring. The good thing about this restructuring is that we'll have a consistent structure both on the server side and the client side. And this makes it easier to maintain this application in the future. So as a new developer joins our team, they know that we have a similar approach on different parts of the application. They don't have to jump all over the code to find a class or a method. So that's a good thing. However, in the real world, keeping an architecture strictly consistent is something that gets a little bit complicated and costly in the long run. So it's okay to have different parts of your application evolve with different architecture. Just know that it's not something that I'm prescribing or recommending to you, but what I'm saying is that if you have inconsistency in your architecture and the cost of making things consistent is too much, it's okay to live with that inconsistency. Now, in the case of merging these two controllers into a single controller, the issue we have here is that we're dealing with API endpoints. So this getMakes method is exposed at /API/makes. And as I explained before, our APIs are contracts between the client and the server. So if the address or the input or output to an API changes, it breaks this contract. And the only way to detect the issues is to run the application and test it end to end. The refactoring we did in the last lecture only involved changing the internals of the client part. If I missed to update the path to our new module, I could catch this issue at compile time. Just by running Webpack and looking at the console, we can tell if there is an invalid reference in the application. But if we move APIs around, we cannot catch the issues at compile time. We can only catch them at runtime. Now you can argue that we can move these two actions, getMakes and getFeatures, into a single controller, but keep the API endpoint the same. So we're not going to update it to /API/vehicles/makes. However, by convention, a lot of developers assume that the name of your controller is in the route. So when you break this convention and add an action inside a vehicles controller that doesn't have the vehicle's name, it looks a little bit ugly. It increases the guesswork because someone joining this team in the future, they don't know exactly where they should find this action. Now, in this particular application, we can still merge these two controllers into a single controller. And then we have to update the client part to reference the new API endpoint. So in vehicle service, we need to update the API endpoint here, adding /API/vehicles/features. The cost of this change for this simple application is not much. I can make this change and test the application in just a couple of minutes. But I'm deliberately not going to make this change, so you remember that in your applications, you should not mess up with your API endpoints, because they're the contracts between the client and the server. So I'm going to leave things the way they are, and in the next lecture, we're going to add a few other fields to our form.